The Vormar wasn't just a predator, it was legend. A creature so deadly, so instinctively perfect at hunting, that entire planetary ecosystems had collapsed when it migrated through them. Its homeworld was declared off-limits by the Galactic Council after 7 military expeditions vanished without trace. The last broadcast captured only a low growl and the panicked breathing of a Threxian commander moments before the feed went black. Since then, the world was sealed under Class 7 Quarantine Protocol, the highest known level, second only to total orbital sterilization. Even mentioning the Vormar during council sessions sparked visible discomfort. The archivists, the oldest living race in the galaxy, recorded stories of the beast spanning eons. They believed it to be a leftover apex life form from a time before genetic drift or artificial evolution, a reminder that nature's deadliest designs didn't need refinement. Enter humanity. They weren't the most advanced species, nor the strongest. But humans were curious, stubborn, and seemingly incapable of fear in the traditional sense. They'd allied with species they should have run from, approached worlds others abandoned, and studied anomalies the rest of the galaxy treated as death sentences. When human xenobiologist Dr. Mara Chen requested clearance to enter the Vormar world for observation, the council didn't even debate it long. The vote was unanimous, denied. They assumed that was the end of it. But they'd never dealt with a determined human scientist before. Mara didn't argue. She didn't appeal. She vanished. Using outdated human scouting maps from early deep space missions, she found a way around the sensor nets and landed quietly on the Vormar's surface. No military escort. No tranquilizers. Just a backpack, survival suit, and a transmitter that began uploading encrypted live-stream footage to an independent Terran channel watched mostly by fringe biology nerds and digital survivalists. At first, it was dismissed as a stunt. But when Mara began cataloging real species from the Death World, predators the Council had only seen in archival footage, the feeds went viral. Viewers watched her calmly document razor beasts, flame-winged scavengers, and worm serpents with acidic blood. Her tone never wavered. She wasn't there to dominate or fight. She was there to understand. She walked softly, talked gently, left offerings of nutrient paste, and documented every sound, movement, and pattern of interaction. There was no armor between her and death, only respect and observation. She spoke directly to the camera, noting signs of the Vormar's presence, trees sheared off in clean horizontal lines too high for any local beast, deep claw patterns gouged into solid stone, carcasses left untouched except for the heart, always removed. "It doesn't kill for food," she said. "It kills for reasons we haven't even begun to understand." The Council watched in silent horror. Multiple species demanded an immediate extraction. The Threx delegate, whose uncle had died during one of the failed extermination campaigns, accused humans of intentionally provoking an extinction-class event. But Mara didn't respond to calls. She wasn't listening anymore. After 5 days of silent tracking, her voice changed. The camera, once mounted on her shoulder, was now still, likely set on a tripod. Her breath was slow, deliberate. "I see it," she whispered. "It sees me." There was no panic in her tone. Only awe. The feed blurred as something massive shifted through the foliage. Bioluminescent tendrils glowed faintly in the dusk. Viewers caught only glimpses: a clawed forelimb longer than Mara was tall, a mouth lined with serrated teeth, a mane of shifting chitin plating down its spine. It stepped into view fully for just one moment, eyes locking onto the camera with intelligent focus. Then it charged. Mara didn't scream. She didn't run. She slowly kneeled. Reached into her pack. Pulled out a sealed protein pouch. She opened it, held it out, and whispered, "You've never seen someone who didn't run from you, have you?" The Vormar halted. Its breathing slowed. The growl changed pitch. A deep, vibrating hum rolled from its chest, neither threatening nor curious. Just watching. Mara set the food down and took 3 steps back. The creature sniffed the pouch, tested it with a claw, and then, shockingly, began to eat. Viewers across the galaxy sat frozen. Delegates were stunned into silence. Even the archivists were still, their shimmering eyes unblinking. The feed flickered as Mara whispered, "It accepted the offering. I don't think it wants war. I think it's been alone too long." And somewhere in a quiet corner of the galaxy, a legend took its first step toward becoming something new. Mara didn't sleep the night after first contact. Not out of fear, but from adrenaline and analytical obsession. Every second of the Vormar's behavior was replayed, frame by frame, in her mind and data logs. The way it stopped just before reaching her, the subtle shift in its shoulders, the deep thrum it made, none of it matched the aggression described in historical records. It hadn't attacked. It had chosen to observe. And, for a moment, to engage. She resumed tracking it at dawn, avoiding direct pursuit, instead mapping the patterns it left behind. Massive, weighty strides that didn't meander. It moved with purpose, circular paths overlapping, always returning to a central location. Territory behavior, yes, but it was more than that. Every cleared area was methodical, not feral. There were arranged bones, clustered stones, even hanging vines shaped into looping formations. These weren't just signs of dominance. They resembled primitive forms of signaling. Her presence wasn't ignored. The Vormar left evidence near her camp every night, deep claw marks not in threatening patterns but evenly spaced lines, like tallies. One morning, a partially cleaned carcass was left just outside her scanner range. Not torn apart, but gutted neatly. As if it was sharing. Each time she offered food again, it would approach slightly closer, never fully trusting, but never fleeing either. She never spoke in commanding tones, never raised her voice. The air between them became a space of negotiation, not confrontation. Days passed, and a new rhythm emerged. The galaxy watched it unfold with conflicted fascination. Back in the council, arguments turned into shouting. Threx and Varnari representatives accused humans of manipulating the feed. They called it doctored, fabricated propaganda to push Terran's soft power influence across galactic education networks. The archivists, unusually vocal, reminded them that the feed had been independently verified through dozens of multi-species data relays. "What you're watching," the oldest among them said, "is real. And it contradicts everything we believed." As if responding to the chaos in orbit, the Vormar began shadowing Mara openly. No longer lurking. It would remain just within visual range during her walks, sometimes mirroring her movements, sometimes pausing when she paused. She recorded its gait, muscle articulation, eye dilation patterns. Its intelligence was undeniable. It wasn't mimicking. It was analyzing her the way she analyzed it. She started leaving out puzzle box containers with food rewards. Latches, sliders, twist locks. The Vormar learned in hours what some trained galactic security species needed weeks to master. It solved them not by brute force, but by watching her demonstrations and adapting. It wasn't just smart. It was cognitively flexible. One evening, she approached slowly and extended her open palm again, this time with nothing in it. The Vormar lowered its head, nostrils flaring, breath hot and steady. It didn't take the gesture as a challenge. It simply leaned forward and touched its snout gently to her fingers before stepping back and disappearing into the trees. A simple acknowledgement. The moment stunned every species watching. The Council could no longer claim coincidence or trickery. The predator of legend, the one feared across generations, was building a bond. Not through genetic rewriting, not by force. Through patience and respect. Something no species had tried before. The silence after the broadcast ended was heavier than any roar. Species who had once described the Vormar as nature's executioner were forced to reconsider the creature's motivations. Perhaps it hadn't attacked the earlier expeditions because of hunger or malice. Perhaps those teams had charged in with weapons drawn, emitting fear, aggression, signals it responded to as any territorial being would. Mara hadn't radiated that. She had approached with curiosity, not dominance. Mara's final log for that day was recorded calmly. "This isn't a monster. It's a survivor. Alone for so long it forgot the difference between prey and visitor. And maybe, it never knew it had a choice." Viewers noticed the change in her face. No longer driven by fame or scientific thrill, she looked at the creature with something deeper, compassion born from recognition. The realization that the galaxy's most feared beast wasn't broken or evil, just misunderstood. And for the first time in its long, lonely existence, it was choosing to trust. And that trust, fragile and tentative, would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy thought it knew. The Council demanded immediate answers. A private summit was held, closed to the public, but internal audio leaked. They argued not over the truth of Mara's footage, but the implications. If the Vormar was intelligent, capable of restraint, capable of bonding, then everything about their prior extermination attempts transformed from self-defense to near genocide. Species that had built entire military budgets on the myth of the apex killer were now scrambling to shift narratives. The Threx envoy proposed erasing the footage. The Varnari wanted to isolate Earth from all diplomatic channels. No one wanted to admit the galaxy had been wrong. Meanwhile, Mara's daily feeds continued. What began as cautious coexistence evolved into mutual routine. The Vormar, now referred to simply as Void Fang, waited for her each morning. They moved together, side by side through terrain that would shred armored patrol units. It no longer tested her distance. It followed her lead, responding to soft-spoken phrases and hand gestures with startling precision. When she placed her hand against a fallen tree to examine spores, Void Fang mirrored the gesture, placing its massive paw beside hers. She noted its emotional responses. Curiosity when she played back recordings. Alertness to changes in her tone. Once, she feigned distress, stumbling and sitting down, breathing heavily. Void Fang didn't attack. It circled her, issued low-frequency pulses, then stood guard until she moved again. Protective instincts, undeniable and reactive. Not predatory. Mara's logs no longer felt like academic entries. Her voice grew softer, reflective. It doesn't just tolerate me. It anticipates me. Adjusts to me. That's empathy, not instinct. She presented evidence of shared experiences, gifting rituals, co-feeding behaviors, cooperative movement. Patterns that matched known bonding species across multiple biomes. Void Fang was not an anomaly. It was part of a social structure no one had ever taken time to see. The Council panicked. A classified retrieval protocol was activated. A stealth cruiser was dispatched with a mixed-species strike team equipped with paralysis rounds, magnetic nets, and neural disruptors. Their orders were ambiguous: recover the human, secure or eliminate the creature if it resisted. They underestimated both. Mara was alerted by orbital shifts. The moment she realized the Council had moved from observation to interference, she uploaded her entire dataset to 6 decentralized Terran servers. She then recorded one more message, not to scientists, not to politicians, but to the general public. This creature is not humanity's pet. It is not our tool. It is a sovereign being. If they come for it, they come for what they fear, the truth that even the deadliest life form in known space is capable of peace, if treated as an equal. The video spread faster than any official transmission ever sanctioned. Millions across hundreds of worlds saw Void Fang gently lowering its massive frame beside Mara, nuzzling her arm with deliberate care. The myth of the perfect killer unraveled in real time. When the strike team arrived, Void Fang didn't run. It stood atop a ridge, fully visible, head high, beside the human it had chosen to trust. The soldiers hesitated. This was not the creature from their training modules. There were no snarls, no wild charges, no bloodlust. Only calm, controlled presence. One of the younger members lowered his rifle and opened his comms. "Command, are you watching this?" Mara stepped forward, voice amplified by her suit. "If you take it, you destroy more than a legend. You destroy proof that violence is not the only language." Void Fang stood unmoving, eyes glowing in the low light, unafraid. Council Command ordered a retreat. The optics were too risky. They feared the backlash more than the creature. The strike team withdrew, leaving only a monitoring satellite in orbit. Void Fang watched the ship vanish into the clouds, then slowly turned and brushed its shoulder against Mara's arm. a gesture that needed no translation. The next day, public messages flooded council channels. Civilian groups, xenobiologists, scholars, even former military leaders called for recognition. Not just of Void Fong, but of Mara's achievement. She hadn't tamed a monster. She had revealed a lie. One woven into galactic policy for generations. Mara didn't celebrate. She knew it wasn't over. But she had changed the question. It was no longer, how do we destroy the Vormar? But, what else have we misjudged? And far from the centers of power, on a world once marked for eternal quarantine, a human and the galaxy's most feared predator watched the stars together. Weeks passed with no new threats from orbit. Mara's days became filled with detailed behavioral mapping. Void Fong responded not just to voice or presence but to tonal inflection, microgestures, and emotional cues. It displayed memory recall, recognizing tools she'd used only once. When Mara brought out her old neural mapping rig, it didn't resist. It leaned down, offering its head. The readings defied previous classifications: highly active frontal lobes, unique electromagnetic spike bursts correlating to emotional exchanges, neurologically closer to dolphins or elephants than known apex predators. She refined her theory. Void Fong wasn't just a relic of predatory design, it was a creature built to lead, perhaps once part of a cooperative species lost to time. Its size and strength had drawn attention, but its mind held the real anomaly. She hypothesized that ancient extinction-level shifts forced its kind into isolation, fragmenting their social structures. What remained was misunderstood as savage, but it had always been complex, just never given the chance to reveal it. Meanwhile, Earth's media had shifted the conversation. Void Fong became a symbol. Not of danger, but of possibility. Children learned about it in schools as part of first contact studies. Artists painted it not with bloodied claws but beneath starlit trees beside Mara. Political debates broke out across council planets, some praising humanity for uncovering a truth hidden for millennia, others accusing them of romanticizing a killer. Yet no one could ignore the raw data. Every scan, every recording, every unedited feed backed Mara's findings. Under pressure, the council launched an independent envoy composed of diplomats, scientists, and neutral observers. Their mission wasn't capture, it was verification. When they landed, Mara greeted them without fear. She shared logs, opened her habitat, and welcomed their scans. But she made one thing clear: no aggression, no containment, no commands. Void Fong was not a subject. It was a sentient presence. It chose peace. It could just as easily choose otherwise. The delegation met Void Fong after days of careful exposure. They were stunned. The creature's presence wasn't chaotic or menacing, it was calm, calculated. It assessed each new face with subtle head tilts, scent testing, and deep-throated vibrations that resembled speech modulation. Several diplomats recorded sonic patterns. Linguists believed they weren't random. Repeating structures hinted at proto-language. Mara didn't translate. She didn't interpret beyond the facts. Her role was observer, not savior. Letting others witness, firsthand, what she had come to understand, Void Fong operated not on instinct alone, but intention. It learned, adapted, and remembered. And it chose connection, even after centuries of being hunted. The Council's biologists confirmed her findings. They ran comparisons with extinct species data recovered from ancient probes. Traces of genetic similarity were found, implying Void Fong may be the last of a line thought wiped out before the Council even formed. A relic, yes, but not primitive. An evolutionary endpoint shaped by isolation, not failure. They called it biocognitive sovereignty, a being that evolved past reliance on packs or tools, surviving through intelligence and dominance alone. Yet here it was, now, choosing company. News of the verification sent ripples across galactic networks. Sanctuary movements formed. Multiple species proposed a classification change, from apex predator to recognized autonomous non-aligned entity. A handful even pushed to offer Void Fong formal diplomatic status. The Council, for all its reluctance, couldn't stop the momentum. Through it all, Mara stayed grounded. She kept studying, kept recording, avoiding fame. When asked why she never gave Void Fang a name beyond the field tag, she replied, "Because it's not mine to name. It belongs to itself." But she noticed changes. Void Fang began initiating contact, not just following her but leading. One morning, it guided her to a cavern she hadn't mapped. Inside were fossilized remains. Several smaller versions of Void Fang, preserved in ash and mineral. It stood over them silently, then turned to her, emitting a long, low harmonic that shook the stone around them. Mourning, perhaps? Or memory? That moment altered her forever. It wasn't just about a misunderstood predator anymore. It was about legacy, survival, and the staggering loneliness of a creature that outlived everything it once knew. Void Fang hadn't just accepted her. It had trusted her with its history. The Council envoy returned to orbit, reports conclusive and unanimously respectful. A provisional resolution passed to reclassify the Vormar species as protected. The Death World was no longer restricted, but marked as sacred territory. Visitation required approval. And no weapons. Mara didn't leave. She stayed because Void Fang still had more to teach. And because something unspoken had formed between them, an unbreakable recognition that two species, shaped by opposite galaxies and histories, had found the rarest of things in all existence: understanding. The following months changed everything, not just for Mara and Void Fang, but for the course of interstellar relations. The official council registry listed Void Fang not under specimen tags or predator classifications but within a newly created category: Sovereign Cognitive Entity, Independent. It was the first time in galactic law that a non-sapient labeled species had been granted recognition based entirely on behavior, and demonstrated intelligence without any direct use of language. What Void Fang offered wasn't speech, it was something older, quieter, and somehow, even more powerful: trust without submission. Back on Council Worlds, reactions were divided. Some species hailed the event as proof of universal commonality, that intelligence needed neither form nor shared origin to be acknowledged. Others raged, insisting the Council had bowed to Terran sentimentalism. But despite the outcry, the truth had been seen too widely, too unambiguously. The creature they had long feared hadn't only been peaceful, it had initiated peace on its own terms. Public demand overwhelmed political resistance. Even the most militarized factions quietly retired centuries-old combat drills meant for Vormar encounters. Mara was offered roles, titles, entire departments. She declined them all. She wasn't interested in directing policy or rewriting history. Her focus remained the same: documentation, observation, and ensuring Void Fang's choices remained its own. Every interaction from that point forward was filtered through consent. If Void Fang stepped away, she didn't follow. If it refused a scan, the scan didn't happen. Consent wasn't a protocol for her. It was sacred. What surprised her most wasn't Void Fang's growing vocabulary of response signals. It was the emotional nuance. When a drone she used for surveying crashed and sparked a small fire, she panicked, scrambling to contain it. Void Fang arrived, not with hostility, but with urgency. It doused the flame using wet soil it carried in its jaws from the nearby river. Not just reacting, but intervening. When it saw the miner burn on her wrist, it pressed its muzzle to the injury with deliberate softness. Empathy wasn't just a theory anymore. It was embodied in a being the galaxy once thought incapable of anything but destruction. Visitors came occasionally, always under agreement that there would be no documentation without permission. Some were scholars, some diplomats, others survivors, relatives of those lost to past expeditions, seeking something they didn't fully understand. Most left changed. Void Fang didn't perform or posture. It simply existed with quiet dignity. That, more than anything, disarmed them. One child from the Andariai delegation had brought a drawing. A simple image of Mara and Void Fang standing under the twin moons. The child offered it without fear. Void Fang tilted its head, took the paper between two claws, and set it gently on a rock beside its den. That gesture reached across species, across trauma, across centuries of misunderstanding. It didn't erase the past, but it rewrote the meaning of the future. The Council eventually offered to transport Void Fang off-world, to introduce it to sanctuaries where it could be studied, or to use its image to promote peaceful coexistence across troubled sectors. Mara refused. So did Void Fang in its own way. Every time a shuttle descended, it would disappear into the forests until they left. Not out of fear, out of refusal. This place was not its prison. It was its memory. Its choice. Late one night, Mara recorded a private log. People think I discovered something. But really, I was just the first to stop and listen. It didn't need translation. It needed recognition. That winter, she noticed Void Fang aging. Movements became slower, its rests longer. Not illness, simply time. Even the strongest fall to it. And Void Fang had lived long, longer than any human, maybe longer than any species alive could fully grasp. One evening, it lay beside her, chest rising and falling steadily, eyes open but distant. She rested her hand against its side. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. When she awoke the next morning, it was gone. No trail. No disturbance. Just absence. It had chosen to leave quietly, the same way it had first appeared, on its own terms. For weeks, Mara searched. Not out of desperation, but out of respect. She found no remains, only the marked stone where the drawing still rested, untouched by wind or weather. She smiled, knowing the message it left behind wasn't for her alone. It was for everyone. Void Fang was no longer myth or threat. It was a reminder that fear often masquerades as wisdom, and that monsters are born more from our refusal to understand than from the creatures themselves. Mara's final transmission was brief. It never needed us to change. It needed us to see. And across the stars, countless beings, some predator, some prey, some both, heard that call. And for the first time, they truly listened.